Warning, this podcast contains violence, sexuality, gore, and other horrible and disturbing things. Listener discretion is advised. Also, the hosts of this venture are ignorant dipshits, so please do not take anything they say as fact. And enjoy the show.
Now, are you sitting comfortably? Good. Then we'll begin.
Today we had 15 homicides and 63 violent crimes, as if that's the way it's supposed to be.
The atoms in your left hand probably came from a different star than your right hand.
It is our basic human right to be fuck up.
A second plane now has crashed into the other tower of the World Trade Center.
Putting chemicals in the water that turn the friggin' frogs gay.
The defendant shall be incarcerated for the rest of her natural life with no possibility of parole.
You are not machines. You are not cattle. You are men.
We were somewhere around Barstow, on the edge of the desert, when the drugs began to take hold.
Occultae Veritatis.
Hello, occultists, and welcome back to Occultae Veritatis podcast. My name is Leon Filger, along with
Sageberry,
Ood Gallifrey,
and in studio with us,
J-Lo,
and
Richard Bigley.
J-Lo.
On July 11th, 1971, the American space station Skylab re-entered Earth's atmosphere over Perth, Australia, with some pieces surviving re-entry and striking a kangaroo, killing it.
Oh.
The government of Australia subsequently sued NASA for littering. The case was settled out of court. By popular demand, this is the space station's episode. Before we jump into the episode, let's jump into the bottle. It's time for What's Your Poison?
So, what's your poison?
So, what's your poison?
I'm bummed out about the kangaroo. I wasn't emotionally prepared for that.
Me neither.
Okay, so...
I mean, a content warning, you dick.
I like how they only went with littering as opposed to, like...
dropping a space station.
Killing wildlife.
Okay, so we already drank some of these Coors, so...
I haven't.
J-Lo,
I'm drinking a blue drink.
On What's Your Poison tonight, I've brought Coors Banquet. And the reason I brought this, it's not my favorite beer, but it's a good one because... my parents used to live in a house in Lakeview, a neighborhood in Saskatoon, and the local bar had 4 beers on tap, and 3 of them were shit, and one of them was Coors Banquet. And so I got really hooked on it because it was the only bar close enough to my house that I could get drunk at and stagger home at 3 in the morning.
You know,
Coors Banquet's fine. I don't even have one. Yeah, fucks.
And I think
let me double fist.
I think people like knee-jerkingly judge like beer of big companies, just like they knee-jerkingly judge beer of like independent brewers. Like they judge one is worse and one better. But I think you have to taste the quality of the beer. And this tastes pretty fucking good.
It's fine.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's light and inoffensive.
Yeah.
No one could get upset with this beer.
No, it's inoffensive.
I always like to say making light beers is actually harder than making like richer beers because the light beer, it tells no lies. Like if you screw up the brewing process on a light beer,
you're fucked.
It tastes like
everything tastes like crap. And
yeah.
Oh yeah.
It's it turns out it's a really hard process. You make fun of Bud, but this guy I knew was saying like Budweiser is a company where they will go to like a tanker ship full of Bud and they'll sample it and they'll be like, oh, this beer's bad. We got to tip it all.
Oh,
and
wow.
They'll just dump because they have a specific standard for what the beer must taste like. Even though it tastes like crap. It's a very finely engineered crap.
I get what you mean about not being able to hide though, because like it's not like you can hide some funny taste, but behind like soaking it in a charcoal barrel or something like that.
Yeah. If you're making
so bitter that you all you taste is bitter, you don't taste the
if you're making like a
or
stout or any of those, you can just call it character if it tastes skunky. You're like, oh no, it's a sour beer. It's meant to be like that.
Okay, Sage, what do you rate it?
It's fine.
Okay, Ood.
This is refreshing as fuck. 7 out of 10.
I would say it's super refreshing. It's a little bit
I'm
too,
gonna go with it's a solid okay.
Yeah.
And Bigley?
I'll go with a 7 out of 10. It's pretty inoffensive to me.
I like this blue drink better.
I'm going to go back to my dead cosmonauts rating scale from the Space Disasters episode. I'm going to give this 14 dead cosmonauts out of 7 times 2 dead astronauts. Although one of them was a Japanese citizen, so it's
14 out of 14?
Yes, 14 out of... Well, no, because cosmonaut lives are worth less than American lives.
Oh, of course.
Hold on. You're only going with 14 dead American? Like, you don't care about those guys on Apollo 1?
Okay, 14. 15, Roger Chaffee, Ed White, and Gus Grissom have been added to the mix.
Oh, goody. We got somebody who knows what they're talking about.
Let's talk about space food. In the early days of space exploration, food was mostly squeezed out of tubes and brought up in dehydrated packets. But today, we can have quite a variety of food. There's all sorts of things that we'd normally consume on Earth that we have here in space. We just need some minor adaptations. In the case of sandwiches, we had to substitute for bread, so we decided to use tortillas. But why? Mostly it's because bread, of course, makes crumbs. When you eat them on Earth, the crumbs fall down to the ground. But here, crumbs are just going to float away. On the other hand, the tortillas that we use are heat-treated and specially packaged in an oxygen-free environment to prevent mold from growing. They're packed in packages like this. And thanks to that process, a tortilla like this can be good for 18 months. So what we're going to do is we're going to open up our tortilla, we're going to get our peanut butter, squirt it onto the tortilla, get our honey, squirt that on there, and we will have a peanut butter honey sandwich in space. Open up the tortilla, and voila, a weightless tortilla.
So depending on your definition of what actually constitute a space station, the world's first space station was either Gemini 8, Soyuz 4 and 5, or Salyut 1. The differences are this. On March 16th, 1966, Neil Armstrong and Dave Scott docked with an unmanned Agena rocket stage. They hooked up, chilled for a bit.
It's an Agena rocket stage.
Oh, I'm sorry. There's something called an Agena rocket, which is a little bit smaller than the Gemini Titan they were using.
Agena rocket stage is going to be the band name for my ska band.
I like that. It's a good ska name.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Anyway, so it's a spent rocket stage. It's just like a big chunk of like tubular metal that floats around in space. And Gemini 8.
Oh, okay.
Now, because there was no pressurized space inside the Agena rocket stage, the astronauts didn't like enter it or anything. They just successfully docked with it. So some people would consider that a space station.
Okay.
I personally wouldn't.
Sounds like you just grabbed onto some space garbage.
Yeah, so I mean, if you January 1969, two Soviet spaceships, Soyuz 4 and 5, successfully rendezvoused, docked, and exchanged crews. Now, I consider this to be the first space station, as both ships were manned and crews came into contact with each other.
There was an episode we did on that, right?
That was Apollo Soyuz.
Yes.
I believe that was one of the first episodes.
It was one of the first ones. I think that was 1971, and it was the first international quote-unquote space station.
Yeah,
Right.
guns on a space station.
Yep. So for some folks, a space station has yet to achieve orbit unmanned and then be visited by a crew. So if this is your definition, then Salyut 1 was the first space station. And it was launched in April 1971 and remained on orbit until October of that year. And during that time, it was visited by crews from Soyuz 10 and Soyuz 11. But Soyuz 10 failed to dock properly, so the cosmonauts were unable to enter Salyut. Soyuz 11 docked successfully, and the two-man crew lived and worked on the tiny space station for 20 days. Soyuz 11 crew later died on re-entry, which I covered in the Space Disasters episode.
Isn't that a TV show like 21 Day Fiancé?
Something like that.
Yeah,
I like that show.
I kind of like that. They force them to move together and like talk to each other's faces, like a small space too on that show. Yeah.
So Salyut 1, which was just like Salyuts 2 through 7. There were
Clearly, just like Salyut.
There were a total of 7 Salyut space stations. 6 of them were civilian, and 1 of them was military. And there, as far as the internet could provide me, I found no details about what the military Salyut was about.
Interesting. I mean, very Russian, I guess.
Very Russian.
Yeah.
Yeah. So these ones consisted of only one room, which was only 4 meters in diameter. So it was not a whole lot bigger than the spaceships that were docking with it.
Wow.
It's like as big as this room. This
It's almost as
tiny
big as the studio, I think.
There are like 1,000 people in here, though.
There are 1,000 people in here.
And all 3 of my dogs.
Yeah.
I don't know how long we could live and work in this space.
Not long.
No.
Because where would we shit?
Oh, no.
Oh, yeah.
Probably in the closet over here.
In the closet over there.
Ah, shit.
Yeah.
I'm in the closet.
The shit closet.
Do you know that the average person on Earth uses 350 liters of water a day? That's over 1,400 cups of water. Water consumption is critical on Earth, but even more so here on the International Space Station, where we have a closed environment. From washing ourselves to making our coffee, or even when we sweat, the water that gets expelled is collected into a purification system, and we reclaim about 93% of all the water on board. Definite soapy water here in space. Mix it up. Well, got some on the outside apparently. Water used to be delivered in water-filled bags like this one. We brought them up on space shuttles and, of course, all of the visiting resupply vehicles. But since 2010, we've got a system on board that can purify the water real time. You don't have to take it out and store it in bags. We have filters and a keg-sized distiller that spins to create artificial gravity and move the wastewater along. And with it, we can recycle about 6,000 liters of extra water for the station each year. We even recycle our urine. But before you cringe at the thought of drinking your leftover wash water and your leftover urine, keep in mind that the water that we end up with is purer than most of the water that you drink on a daily basis at home. That makes the International Space Station its own self-contained environment. That's a critical step towards living for long periods off of planet Earth.
So, Salyut is the Russian word for "Hey, what's up?" It's the informal hi. So it was the first space station program put together by the Soviet Union. It was a series of 4 crewed scientific research stations and 2 crewed military reconnaissance, one of which was officially military and the other was sort of civilian, but there may or may not have been guns on board.
Oh.
It was interesting because when I covered the Apollo-Soyuz missions, both crews allegedly were armed. Right, because they both had to consider the possibility that the other crew from the USSR or the United States would try to take, quote unquote, the space station. So it's definitely possible that these 2 military space stations are somehow armed and were designed to maybe track down and take out U.S. satellites.
Oh boy! I mean, I wouldn't put it past them. I mean, they were doing all kinds of envisioning for the space wars and taking what happened in World War II into space and all that. And
yeah, so there were not all the Salyut stations worked. One of them fucked up and didn't make it to orbit. Interestingly enough, the last of the Salyut stations skipped the Russian space station Mir, which I'll talk about in a minute, and became the Zarya module for the International Space Station. So this is like old Soviet technology that was then launched in 1998 to become part of the International Space Station.
That's fun.
Yeah. So the Salyut flights broke several spaceflight records, including several mission duration records, and achieved the first orbital handover of a space station.
So an orbital handover.
From one crew to another.
That's like one level above a Mile High Club, I think.
So anyway, the Soyuz program, which spun off from Salyut, and Soyuz was a series of manned space capsules that are still launched today on a Russian Proton rocket, and they're currently the only way that crews get to and from the International Space Station.
Oh boy, that's why the scientific community has to play nice.
Yeah, well, it's because it's about $30 million for each seat.
Oh shit.
On Soyuz. So when the Americans want to send astronauts up to the International Space Station, they have to buy a seat on a Russian rocket, and all those Russian rockets are commanded by Russians.
Oh yeah. And when you look on the social media or the blogs or the writings that these scientists put out on both sides, Russian and American, you almost forget about the political tensions that are rising between Russia and America. The scientific community has to get along because they have so much invested in this, and they have to help each other in order to succeed.
What happens when countries are isolated, at war, or just don't get along? What do the scientists do then? In some areas of science, it's impossible to do research without collaborating with another country. The United Nations Educational, Scientific, and Cultural Organization, or UNESCO, reported that in 2015, an average of 1 in 4 published scientific papers listed some form of collaboration with foreign scientists, and that number continues to grow. For instance, the high altitude, lack of atmosphere, and dry conditions in certain parts of Chile make it one of the best places on Earth to view activity in outer space. This is one reason that it is estimated by 2020, 70% of the global infrastructure for astronomical observation will be located in Chile. With the rest of the world's astronomers dependent on their facilities for sensitive measurements, good relations are critical if research in astronomy is to advance. But consider what happens if countries have a challenging political relationship. U.S. relations with Cuba, for instance, have been famously strained since the 1960s. While exchange of scientific information was never expressly forbidden, U.S. embargoes on everything from travel to trade between the two countries has made it difficult for Cuban scientists to access instrumentation and equipment that scientists outside of Cuba take for granted. This is because modern reagents and scientific equipment are often manufactured in or contain parts from the United States, which exempts them from sale to Cuba. Even with these challenges, Cuba is a superstar of science. They were the first country to receive validation from the World Health Organization for eliminating mother-to-child transmission of HIV, and their lung cancer vaccine was an early success for cancer immunotherapy. These innovations made formalized scientific collaboration between the US and Cuba politically more attractive. And in 2014, the American Association for the Advancement of Science and the Cuban Academy of Sciences signed a historic agreement to seek opportunities for sustained cooperation. Where the public may perceive hostility, scientific collaboration still thrives because scientists find greater value in, well, science.
The Silute programs were supposed to then spin off to something called the ALMAS program, but it ended up never being finished because they kept one of the Silute modules on the ground that was then supposed to be launched as part of the space station Mir, but ended up not being launched, and then, like I said, became the Zarya module for the International Space Station. So there were a total of 9 space stations that were launched in Silute. 6 of them were successful, and the others were not. In total, there were 1,697 days of occupancy on all the space stations combined.
Holy crap.
Which is pretty huge.
Yeah, yeah. You know, for a species that just learned how to fly a little over 100 years ago, like the fact that we're occupying space for months at a time, years at a time.
That's wild.
Yeah.
So anyway, Silute was important because the first Silutes that went up were powered by nuclear power plants.
Oh, fuck.
Which caused problems when they re-entered. Because they were literally like nuclear dirty bombs raining down through the atmosphere. None of the Silutes caused any problems with raining nuclear debris on anyone. But later on, there were some Russian space stations that did cause some problems in that regard.
And I think the Russian attitude back then was their end of life for their space stations, like decaying and falling back into orbit, was just part of the program before like international laws against that went up. Like, hey, don't cause cancer in a random part of the world. That'd be super shitty of you.
Yeah, for sure. So, like I said, the first Silute station was launched in 1971, and the last one was launched in 1985. Okay, so next
Open
up
the
is
wormhole.
Skylab. So Skylab was the first United States space station, which was launched and operated by NASA and occupied for a total of 24 weeks between May 1973 and February 1974. And it was the only space station the U.S. has operated exclusively. And in 1979, it fell back to Earth amid huge worldwide media attention. It included a workshop, a solar observatory, and other systems necessary for crew survival. Now, there were 3 Skylab crews, and when Skylab first went up, it had a malfunction. It was supposed to have 2 solar arrays, one on either side, that would generate power for the space station.
Oh, yes.
But one of them got fucked up when it separated from the Saturn booster stage. And so they were like literally running on half power the entire time.
Yikes.
Which meant that, I mean, just like a circuit breaker, they have to turn certain circuits off if they wanted to flush the toilet and run scientific experiments at the same time. So it was chronically
no
underpowered.
pooping. Can't poop.
That's like
Doing
a shitty,
science.
That's like a shitty apartment. Got to unplug the fridge if you want to use the toaster.
Yeah, and as Skylab existed, it had a garbage locker in the floor where they just like stuffed all their trash because they didn't have the abilities to do the type of spacewalks where they could throw garbage overboard, because there was no way to propel garbage away from the space station. So if they had dumped garbage overboard, it would have just hovered around the space station as garbage and obscured the other solar array. So they had to store all of their garbage in a giant garbage tank.
Yeah, not to mention
Garbage Tank is the name of my new
thrash band.
Yeah, thrash
It's a
band.
garbage tank.
Garbage Tank.
Well, and not to mention, like at that height and the speeds that they're moving, like paint flecks become real like adversaries to space stations that can cause real damage, let alone the other garbage they could be throwing out. They could turn into just projectiles.
Well, you hit you hit a fleck of paint at like 16,000 kilometers an hour or something like that. Probably faster, eh? Like how fast do they orbit?
27,000 kilometers an hour.
There you go, 27,000 kilometers an hour. You hit a piece of paint.
It goes around the world 16 times a day, every 90 minutes.
Yeah, force equals mass times acceleration, and they're min-maxing on the acceleration there.
Yeah, so I mean, like on the International Space Station, for example, there's a module called the cupola, which is a 360-degree viewing module, and the glass panels that are really thick are all pockmarked with little micrometeoroid impacts, a lot of which are bits of space debris.
The International Space Station has been hit by flying space junk, and now it has a 7mm chip in one of its windows. It's tiny and definitely a chip, not a crack, but in the vacuum of space, you have to take even the smallest of impacts deadly seriously. Luckily, the windows used on the space station are made of some pretty sturdy stuff and are quadruple glazed for extra protection. According to Geek.com, the chip was caused by space debris only a few thousandths of a millimeter across. It could have just been a flake of paint or tiny piece of metal. Debris up to 1 centimeter can disable instruments and take satellite systems offline. Fortunately, to keep the space station and any other space vessel and satellite out of the danger zone, NASA and the Department of Defense have a system in place for tracking any potential threat. Anything that enters their area will alert ground control and the crew, who will then determine the best course of action.
Oh boy.
Now, Skylab was lucky that it went up in 73 and there wasn't a whole lot of space junk orbiting up then. I mean, we'd only been shooting shit into space since the 50s. And other than like television satellites, which were just sort of in their infancy, and other sort of spy satellites and whatnot, there's not a whole lot of shit flying around up there.
Yeah.
There were spent booster stages from other Apollo missions, but there were so few of them, and the Earth is so massive that the odds of colliding with one of them were relatively small.
Yeah.
So Skylab was launched unmanned by a modified Saturn V rocket, and that's the same rocket that sent all the Apollo missions to the moon. So there were three astronaut crews that went up. And as I had said about this garbage tank, they ran into problems because they generated more garbage than the garbage tank could hold.
Oh, no.
And so by the third mission, what they would do is put a piece of garbage into the door of the garbage tank, try to swing the door shut, and then two of them would jump on the door.
It's like what I do when I'm putting my clothes away.
Exactly. Jump on the door until the garbage tank closed. Also, they did some inadvertent human experiments in that the Skylab crews had their days timed down to the minute. Mm-hmm. So they knew exactly how much time they were going to spend on this experiment and that, exactly how many minutes and seconds they were going to spend sleeping, how many minutes and seconds they were allowed to take a shit every day. And by the end of the third crew, there was a mutiny.
That seems unreasonable.
Yeah. So the crew went on strike.
In space?
In space.
Yeah, for space track.
Yeah, for space strike. And they refused to do certain experiments, and they refused to wear their uniforms, and they were just scooting around in their underwear all day and just like refused to do fuck all.
What are you gonna do? You're back on Earth like a bunch of nerds.
And so after a couple
Astronauts Local 1.
So after a couple of days of this strike, NASA relented on all its requirements and allowed them to relax their schedule a little bit.
It allowed them to take 4 minutes to shit instead of 3.
I bet Richard Nixon just hated or would have hated that.
Yeah.
All goddamn communists.
So 5 minutes to shit.
Another thing that was interesting about Skylab, and back to the old Silute stations and the Space Station Mir and the International Space Station, all of those space stations are maneuvered around in their orbit by orbital maneuvering thrusters.
You said maneuvering like 1,000 times.
Did I?
Yeah.
Okay, so they were maneuvering.
It's a fun word to say.
Maneuvering.
It's a very woody word.
So in order to change their attitude, which is sort of the direction in which they're facing, they used orbital maneuvering thrusters to change their attitude. On Skylab, though, they used something different.
Use thrusters to change my attitude, too.
God.
I'm not sorry.
I mean, that was a really good one.
Did they just throw garbage out the door? Like, that would work.
It would have worked.
Transfer of momentum. Yeah.
No, so they had some giant gyroscopes inside the space station.
For maneuvering.
Maneuvering gyroscopes.
Attitude.
Yeah, and so if they wanted to point in one direction or another, they just fired up the gyroscopes and it rotated the station using inertial energy.
Beautiful.
So a couple of giant gyroscopes to change your attitude.
Yeah,
works for me.
It's hard not to change an attitude with a lot of thrusting, actually.
Right. So after the first Skylab mission, when they realized that one of their solar arrays was fucked, they sent up future Apollo Command and Service modules, which is the name of the spaceship that takes people to Skylab.
Ooh.
They put additional solar panels on the side of those things so that when they docked with Skylab, they could deploy those solar panels and generate additional electricity for the space station. So there were plans for a fourth Skylab mission, and they had an Apollo Command and Service module ready to go. They also had an emergency Apollo Command and Service module that could have been launched robotically to go to Skylab to pick up the astronauts if there had been some sort of disaster.
Oh, that's kind of a good contingency plan, having like a non-human vehicle that could go.
Yeah, and it was always sitting on the launch pad ready to go. And then with each progressive mission, they would use that Command and Service module as the current active Command and Service module, and they get another backup Command and Service module on the launch pad ready to go.
There you go.
So they'd planned for a fourth Skylab mission, but by that point, the Skylab was kind of a shithole. They filled it up with garbage. It wasn't working terribly well. So they canceled that mission. And then
the thrust and gyration were all off.
Yeah. So
story of my life.
But
so they had planned at one point for the space shuttle to come online, and they were going to reuse Skylab as another space station and have the space shuttle come and visit it. But the Skylab's orbit started to decay, and what orbital decay is when microgravity starts pulling your space station closer to the Earth, and as it gets closer to the Earth, there's little bits of atmospheric particles in the super high atmosphere that slam into the space station as it's orbiting around and slow it down, and eventually it falls back to Earth. And that's what happened to Skylab. So its atmospheric reentry began on July 11th, 1979. And before the reentry, NASA ground controllers tried to adjust its orbit to minimize the risk of debris landing in populated areas with their target, which is the South Indian Ocean, was partially successful. But debris showered Western Australia. Recovered pieces indicated that the station had disintegrated lower than expected. And as the Skylab program drew to a close, NASA's focus had shifted to the development of the space shuttle.
A much closer encounter with space came in 1979, the year we celebrated our 150th birthday.
It was awe-inspiring, really. At first, I couldn't believe that it would be Skylab, but obviously the flash was Skylab exploding as it approached the coast here over Albany, and then broke into hundreds, literally hundreds of multicoloured pieces.
It's hard to appreciate now, but there was worldwide hysteria when the crippled US space station Skylab threatened Earth. No one knew where it would hit. While millions feared for their lives, others made the most of it.
I'm protected, he's protected, he's protected, we're protected, wouldn't you like to be protected?
Then one night, out-of-control Skylab came crashing down on Western Australia.
Well, I thought we were, dead for sure. It's one thing I'll never forget, and it'll always be in my head, at seeing that Skylab coming towards us.
We lost track of the thing on its last pass somewhere around, what the devil's name of it? The Kerguelen Islands or something, roughly Ascension Island. And the next thing we heard was that it was coming down over Australia.
Charcoal lumps of Skylab landed on a tin shed in Esperance.
I just look up, it was just like cutting 100 metres off, it felt like it was, and then the shell went quiet and the sonic boom after that, and everybody's like, oh, what was that?
17-year-old Stan Thornton quickly grabbed the chunks, got on a plane to America and claimed $10,000, the prize for the first bit of Skylab returned to the United States.
I'd been to Perth and been to, as far as Geraldton, but never out of Western Australia, and that's when it started buzzing. I think the head started spinning. I was getting followed around everywhere by at least 4, 5, 10 cameras at a time.
In remote Baladonia, meanwhile, the lone telecom phone box got a very important call.
Then they said that the President of the United States wished to speak,
And another voice came on, and he said that he wished to apologise to all the Australian people for the inconvenience of Skylab landing over Australia.
The biggest chunk, an oxygen cylinder, was hauled into Kalgoorlie, where police seized it as lost property.
So after Skylab, NASA space station and laboratory projects included Spacelab, which was a mini space station that rode in the cargo bay of the space shuttle, as well as the Shuttle Mir program, which involved the space shuttle visiting the Russian space station Mir, which we'll talk about in a moment, and the space station Freedom, which was an only American space station that was
Of course
later,
it was called fucking Freedom. It's American.
Oh, yeah.
that was later merged into the International Space Station.
They could have called it Liberty.
Freedom fries. America.
Fuck yeah! Fuck yeah!
Free speech.
Fuck yeah!
Jesus machine gun.
Fuck yeah! America!
Fuck yeah!
Okay, so next up, and I'll touch briefly on it, is the space station Mir. And Mir is the Russian word for friendship, allegedly, according to Wikipedia.
I like that.
So if you
have a Russian man in my closet. He was the guy that started the KKK.
I was going to say, I'm Irish.
I'm a dirty communist.
Mm.
So, yeah.
Yeah.
Not the KKK, the KGB. Save.
The KGB.
Yes.
I haven't eaten anything today except for a peanut butter square.
Okay.
You're excused.
Anyway, so the space station Mir was a continuation of the Silute program, and it used the second last Silute module to start the space station, and eventually it had 10 modules on it that were stuck in all sorts of weird ways like a spider.
Mm.
And all of the
like
modules...
being stuck in weird ways.
Yeah. All the...
Yeah.
all of Mir's modules were cylindrical in one way or another. And
Very tubular.
Over the 20 years that Mir was in orbit, it slowly got shittier and shittier
My
and
dog
shittier.
keeps farting. I'm sorry. It's Panda.
The ventilation system was infamously bad on Mir, to the point where cosmonauts and astronauts on the station had to wake each other up in 1 hour intervals because their exhaled carbon dioxide would start to form bubbles around their faces. So they would actually suffocate in their sleep because the ventilation was so poor. Man. So one of your friends would have to come along and blow on you to move the carbon dioxide away from your face.
Jesus, that would be the stupidest way to die. Well, no, okay, I shouldn't say that. There are much stupider ways to die. But that would, I mean, depending on your friend to just puff some new oxygen in front of your face, I mean, Jesus.
Yeah. So anyway, there were plans near the end of the Mir program to roll it into the International Space Station, and they were going to stick a bunch of new American modules on it. But in the end, it was decided that Mir was too shitty to carry on, and they allowed it to re-enter the atmosphere. And again, like I said at the beginning of the show, crashed in Australia, killed a kangaroo. It was also kind of sketchy because one of its modules was nuclear powered, and so it did rain some nuclear debris over Western Australia.
That's never good.
Never good.
3-headed kangaroos.
Moving on now to the International Space Station.
Hi, Chris Hadfield here aboard the International Space Station. We keep busy on board the space station. Long days, lots of work, physical exercise. At the end of it, you're tired. But how do you sleep in space? In order to make it comfortable for the astronauts, originally they were going to put us all in one habitation module with sleep stations all around it. But the way a station was eventually built, we have sleep stations inside Node 2, which is in the forward part of the station, and inside the service module, which is in the aft. A total of 6 small bedrooms, sleep stations, or sleep pods. And inside each one is just a sleeping bag tied to the wall. You might think it's uncomfortable not having a mattress and a pillow, but without gravity, of course, you don't need anything to hold you up. You can just completely relax. And you don't even need a pillow. In space, you don't even have to hold your head up. So you can relax every muscle in your body, and your arms float up in front of you. Your head tips forward. But before I go to sleep, I gotta put on my pajamas, because I have space jammies. I'll be right back. Great. I'm in my super comfy Russian full-length pajamas. Nice for when you have to get up in the middle of the night, and ready to go to bed. I'll show you where I sleep. This is my sleep station, my sleep pod. This is where I spend up to 8 hours every day, here on board the space station. It's actually on the floor, but once you're inside, you just can't tell.
You just took like half the book of notes. You're like, fuck it.
Fuck it.
Oh, you didn't really address the Taco Bell thing where they put a big target in the ocean, and if Mir landed on this target, everybody in America got like a free taco or something.
Yeah,
What?
Taco Bell. Yeah, no, they
fuck?
did.
Yeah, serious. This is
Tell the
literally
story,
what
Bigley.
happened. Okay, well, Taco Bell. I think I pretty much just said the story.
Yeah.
But it was, they put like a 40 by 40 target in the, I guess, South Pacific or something like that. And if the Mir hit this target, everybody got a free taco. And, I mean, it's Taco Bell, so it's not like actual food. It's kind of like Taco Bell food,
That was
I
from
guess.
2001.
Yeah, and...
it's hot. It's like, it's a spicy diarrhea fuel.
Yeah.
Yeah.
For re-entry, maybe.
Yeah.
So anyway, but it didn't hit, so I guess Taco Bell got a bunch of free advertising, and especially on this podcast here at this particular moment. And then, and then that was that, and Mir crashed, and we're done.
Well, earlier this week, we told you about the Taco Bell target. If Mir lands on this 40 by 40 foot bullseye off the coast of Australia, the company has promised free tacos to every American. And we asked Colorado State University physics professor Brian Jones, what are the chances Taco Bell will be buying us lunch tomorrow?
The Russians have defined a region along the trajectory where they're pretty sure that the debris is going to come down, hopefully far from islands and ships and other things that we care about.
What are the odds that once that thing enters the atmosphere, burns up, and explodes into a million pieces, that one of those pieces is going to hit the sign in the Pacific Ocean?
Do 3,600 miles. Let's convert to kilometers. This is 193 kilometers for the width. A lot. Multiply by a conversion factor. We'll get the Taco Bell target has an area of 0.0001488 square kilometers. I don't know. This is where the numbers get very, very big very fast. The Mir zone has an area of 1,118,000. So you can tell the target is a very, very small fraction of the area.
Give it a wild guess.
1 in a million. 7.5 billion? I don't know. What are the odds? The odds are about 1 in 7.5 billion. Bottom line?
No taco.
Bottom line? No taco.
Would you take the free taco?
Yeah, I would.
Okay.
If you make space-based marketing, I'm going to pay attention because I'm just a mindless consumer. I'm going to do it. So, yeah, good job, Taco Bell.
So moving on to the International Space Station, the first module flown was Zarya, which was supposed to be the last of the Salyut space stations. After Zarya went up, the space shuttle brought up Node 1, which is just like a giant cube that attached other modules to it. And then the Zvezda module went up on the space shuttle. Now, the Zarya module was designed and built in Russia, but funded entirely by the United States. It was supposed to be funded by Russia, but then they ran out of money, and so the U.S. said, well, if we're going to put this space station together, we need this first module up. And Zarya was sort of like the brain and power hub for the first half of the space station. It had all the electrical systems on board, all the computing power, and then Node 1 went up on the space shuttle, and Zvezda went up on the space shuttle. And so by the end of 1999, the International Space Station had 3 modules, and then it continued to grow over the next decade.
Module by module.
Module by module. Yep. All of them subsequently brought up by the International Space Station.
I bet the engineers that built that grew up on Lego.
They probably did.
Yeah.
So a total of 240 people from 18 countries have visited the International Space Station since it first went up in 1998. And I got to say, like, in 1998, I was in grade 8 and was in space camp. Yeah. And when Zarya first flew, and they started constructing the International Space Station, it was like the coolest time of my life because I was a super huge space nerd and I was like just getting into space, and suddenly like the largest engineering marvel of the world was being created before my eyes. And it was an incredibly exciting time, and I'm still addicted to it now.
It's amazing that we got out of our own way to complete that project because, like, I don't know, huge worldwide scientific projects. I mean, it seems like they're becoming less and less likely with the current administrations in charge.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think the space station could have been done today.
Yeah.
They've got plans to operate it at least until 2024, at which point, if nothing is done about it, they plan to re-enter it. So what they're going to do is, and it's tricky because the thing's as big as a football field.
If we're still going, fuck, we should do a live stream that day. You know, drink away the International Space Station.
Yeah, I mean, like the solar array itself, the wingspan of the solar array is 240 feet, which is the same width as an Airbus A380.
Jesus,
nothing to me.
So I think what that means is it crashing would be relatively equivalent to like an Airbus crashing.
It's 4 times the size of Mir, 5 times the size of Skylab.
Fuck. Okay, so
and both of those survived. Parts of them survived re-entry.
Yeah, hundreds of thousands of pounds of steel and alloys and reinforced whatever the fuck.
Yeah, I mean, the thing is 357 feet end to end, so it's like a yard shy of an American football field, including the end zones.
Yep. That's destruction.
Yep. So the space station's been continuously occupied since November of 2000.
That's awesome.
There's usually 6 people up there. 3 of them are from Roscosmos, which is the Russian space agency, and the other 3 are from NASA or JAXA, which is the Japanese space agency, or the Canadian space agency.
Do they just call it the CSA?
They do call it the CSA.
That's boring.
CSA ASC.
Yes.
Agence Spatiale de Canada.
You know, I just watched a little video about what they have to do to prepare for flights up there in the International Space Station, and they get each. Funny enough, they get each astronaut to fill out a form about their favorite foods and what they would eat. And then they go to a normal grocery store. So the person you're walking beside in the grocery store might be a NASA scientist shopping. Mm-hmm. And they bring all the food from the grocery store to the NASA labs, and then they cook it and they
dehydrate it,
and they
put it into little bags.
Yeah, and they put it up. And like an astronaut puts like the foods they could eat for a long time, the foods they love on this list, and they go to the grocery store, and it tickles me that they just go to like Walmart or the local grocery store to pick that shit up.
Pierogies
and the thing is,
for 6-month mission.
Yeah,
every day pierogies.
Yeah.
every astronaut and cosmonaut that goes up, they send about 110% of the food they need to survive, which means at the end of every mission, there is the shitty 10% of the meals that no one wanted to eat.
Oh boy, that sounds like the exchange box for MREs.
Yeah, and there are people called spaceflight participants, who are folks who pay the $30 million to ride on a Soyuz up for a couple weeks on the space station, and allegedly those spaceflight participants are fed the 10% of leftovers that the astronauts and cosmonauts don't want to eat, because their spaceflight participants are genuinely hated by NASA astronauts, because they're like, you train for 6 years for your mission to the space station. Like you're chosen 6 years ahead of time, and you have to go to Star City, Russia, and you have to learn Russian. And I mean, the training program for it's extensive. So if you're a spaceflight participant, which is 16 months of training, the astronauts hate you because you're up there taking up the right seat in the Soyuz capsule, and then you're fucking around on the space station. Although spaceflight participants are relegated to the Russian half of the space station, which is the shitty half.
Okay. Yeah, I guess not as new technology, not as updated equipment. Like the UI and the way that the equipment works is older and harder to use, more steps.
It's like 1990s era technology, so it's pretty shitty. And the thing is, like, the ventilation is only so good. So when you're using the toilet, little shit bits float around and stick to the walls. Shit bits. Yeah. So, like, the inside of the Russian half of the space station is stained brown just from, like, shit that's stuck to the walls.
I mean, I see it as, like I think, like, a general mechanic should not have the same clout and ability to like explore and fix the facility as like an engineer. Like say we're talking about CERN, like because it's up in space and like it's isolated, it seems a bit different. But let's say we're talking about CERN, the Large Hadron Collider. Would you give the same privileges and the same power to a general mechanic as opposed to like an engineer that helped build the thing?
I think you make a very good point.
Yeah, like I
think
be
classist here, my friends.
I think classism is like. It's irrelevant when it comes to science because you want the best people doing the best job, and you need that education.
Yeah, I mean that's That's fair. And I would hate a spaceflight participant too, unless I was one.
Yeah.
But you've got to be a gazillionaire in order to take a flight on the Soyuz.
Like how many people have done that? Because that's a
7 that I know of. The first one was a guy named Dennis Tito.
That's wild. It's like $30 million.
Yeah.
Like you'd actually know the shit, but as an engineer, you'd know like the math for the shit.
Yeah, I guess.
I mean, think about it this
Like,
way.
what's
like
more valuable, the math or the actual, like, I don't know.
The original American astronauts, the Mercury 7, of them, all of them were test pilots. None of them were scientists.
Okay.
And they were going up on scientific missions. And in fact, until Apollo 17, I think it was, every single U.S. astronaut was a test pilot. Finally, there was a guy named Jack Schmitt who went up, I think, on Apollo 17, who was an actual geologist. And they sent him on the moon collecting rocks. But up until that point, like all the NASA astronauts who flew on Apollo were sent to the desert in Colorado, and some actual geologists taught them how to spot important rocks.
Well, exactly. Like you can teach people like put this into that, and that's how you do the experiment.
Maybe I'm looking at this too narrowly. Yeah. I think I agree. Yeah.
Nice.
So, interesting fact about the International Space Station. It's the third brightest object in the sky at night, behind the moon and Venus.
No, behind the moon and Sage Murray.
So if you go to...
I'm going to add a sound effect. Like, yeah.
If you want to see the space station, and odds are 90% that you live somewhere in the world where you can see the space station, go to spotthestation.nasa.gov and you can punch in your city and it will send you text alerts when the space station is flying over.
Neat.
And I think one of the big clues is stars sparkle, but the space station doesn't. It's a constant little reflection.
And it really fucking hauls ass across the sky. Yeah. Richard Bigley has a little story to tell us about the 3 pass.
One night, really early fucking morning, something like that.
I think we started about 9 p.m.
Yeah, we drove out far outside of the city lights to like a Beaver Creek or some road
Beaver
just
Creek,
off of Beaver Creek, and just parked, and we just kind of hung out outside.
And we drank warm beer because you fucking brought warm beer.
Fuck's wrong with you?
it turned warm after being
That's what she
cold.
said.
But and you just sat there, and then it orbits every 90 minutes.
Every 90 minutes.
So it's like every 90 minutes, like clockwork. There's the ISS, and it's really cool because you don't need any sort of really expensive equipment to
no
see
binoculars
it.
required.
Even if you have like a decent set of binoculars, like you can look at it and still find like very, very intricate details just by looking through binoculars. You don't actually need a telescope or anything like that. Just a dark enough sky and good aim and a set of binoculars, and you can make out the panels and everything.
And here's the cool thing. This is like the most badass fucking thing I can imagine. Depending upon the time at which you look at the space station, if you check NASA's launch schedules, and I've only seen this once, and it was incredible. I was outside the city, halfway between Saskatoon and Regina, and I'd pulled over because my phone buzzed and said the International Space Station is coming.
Yeah.
And there was a Dragon spaceship that had been launched earlier that day, and it takes 6 hours for the Dragon to get from the ground to the space station. And during one of the passes, about 3 degrees behind the bright space station was a smaller white speck. And that was the Dragon spacecraft catching up with the space station.
That's cool.
That's so epic as fuck.
Yeah.
Yeah. In motion.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So like I said, in 24 hours, the space station makes 16 orbits. So the astronauts on board get to see 16 sunsets and sunrises every day.
Wow.
Oh, boy.
Which is incredibly romantic.
I think so.
Also, fun fact, a woman, Peggy Whitson, holds the record for the most number of days in space cumulatively.
Oh, really? What is it?
As of September 2nd, 2017, she had spent 665 days in space.
Holy fuck.
Which beat the old record by 15 days.
Man.
And she still holds the record today.
Nice.
Can you imagine? And with the amount of space that's allotted to each person, that's pretty much that amount of time in like one big room.
Yeah. So other cool thing about the space station is that it has the same floor space. You can't really say floor space because you can very literally utilize 3 dimensions on the space station. Everything is a floor, everything is a ceiling, everything is a wall, but it's got the same pressurized space as a Boeing 747.
Okay.
Oh, geez.
So it's big. There's a lot of room to move around in there. And with only 6 people, if you do need to get away from your friends, there's definitely a place you can go to hide.
Yeah.
And one of the modules, and it's my favorite module, is called the cupola, which I had talked about earlier. And it's sort of like a bubble that sticks off the side of, I think, the Harmony module.
Isn't that pronounced cupola?
No, it's cupola.
Is it? I'm going to Google it.
Go ahead. It's pronounced cupola.
I almost believe you.
You got to believe me.
It's cupola.
Thank you.
It's cupola.
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 Cupola. Well, that's wrong. I've heard astronauts pronounce it cupola.
It says cupola.
That was probably their Canadian accent.
And even in here it says cupola.
Okay.
It's cupola everywhere.
Fucking wrong.
We're all wrong. You were more right than me, though.
Let's
cut to a clip of Canadian astronaut Chris Hadfield saying cupola.
Blame it on him.
Blame it on him.
Chris Hadfield.
A spaceship is coming, and we need to go catch it with Canadarm2. I'm going to show you where we operate Canadarm from and what it looks like to be a robotic operator on the International Space Station. If you want to operate a robot, it's nice to be able to see what you're doing. The space station has one special place for windows called the cupola, called the cupola, called the cupola, called the cupola, called the cupola. And that's where we fly Canadarm2 from to grab a dragon. Let me show you. Here inside the cupola are all of the controls necessary in order to operate and see what you're doing with the Canadarm. Let me show you what we have. Here in the center, we have the main computer interface that shows all of the displays necessary to operate it. Over here on the right, we have the rotational hand controller. Here on the left, we have the translational hand controller to move things up and down. And then across, we have 3 screens that show various camera views around the outside of the space station, so you can see what you're doing. And then the last thing is the manual control panel that has way to control cameras, way to set up the arm into different modes, make sure you have everything set through a nice simple interface so that you can operate Canadarm with confidence and assurance and let it do its job. To operate Canadarm, you need to have your body stable. And so there's a place you can stick your feet. Not too complicated. Tuck my toes in here, and now my hands are stable, my body's stable, and I'm all set to operate Canadarm2.
Also include the clip of is somebody singing or whatever. That's a pretty
okay.
The song.
Find out if there's copyright on that. Yeah, let's make it the palate cleanser. Let me introduce the clip though.
Fuck yeah.
Okay, so on the palate cleanser at the end of the episode, this is the most expensive music video ever made.
Yep.
It cost $180 billion to make. if you assume that the space station was established exclusively to record this one music video,
which I do not.
I'm safe with that assumption.
So
seems reasonable.
Also,
I'll allow it.
In order for this music video to take place, NASA had to establish the fastest satellite uplink in human history.
Oh.
Because Chris Hadfield was singing on the International Space Station, and on the ground in a Toronto music studio were the Barenaked Ladies and a children's choir.
I don't think it was all the Barenaked Ladies.
It was all
just
the
Ed Robertson.
It was all the Barenaked Ladies.
You sure?
I'm positive.
Okay.
All the Barenaked Ladies
All
show
of
up for
them.
Chris Hadfield.
Okay.
All of them.
All of them and Chris
I know I
Hadfield.
sure did.
Times.
Even Stephen Page?
All 5
Not
billion
Stephen
of
Page.
them.
Well, then that's not Barenaked Ladies. I'm sorry. You have to go.
It was hard to coordinate the schedules of
Is
5
the-
billion women.
It's the
but-
Barenaked Ladies minus Stephen Page. It's the Barenaked Ladies. Anyway, so yeah, check. We're gonna play the audio, and in the show notes, there's gonna be a link to the YouTube video. It's fucking incredible.
Where you'll see it's just Ed Robertson.
Tyler Stewart is in there playing in the background. You'll see it. You can see him playing the drums. Jim Cregan is there. Kevin Hearn is there. Trust me, they're all there.
Okay.
I believe it's kind of amazing that you're having an argument about what the essential property of being the Barenaked Ladies is. Like there's a dispute here. Like, I'm
Stephen
sorry.
Page. Without Stephen Page, it's not the Barenaked Ladies.
It's the
I'm
Barenaked
sorry.
Ladies. They've been the Barenaked Ladies for 10 fucking years.
It's
without
still
Stephen
not
Page.
though. It's
Fuck you.
Like
Is Theseus'
Okay,
ship
but you fucking
still
asshole.
Theseus' ship
Listen,
at the
fucker.
first grain
Listen-
of sand
let's take
scratches
this shit
the bow?
outside.
Listen, fucker. Okay, we went. No, shut the fuck up. Listen here. Listen.
If the cat sheds one hair, is it truly the same cat?
No, listen. Look, we went to a Barenaked Ladies concert, did we not?
Yes.
The tickets said the Barenaked Ladies, did they not?
Yes.
Stephen Page was not present, was he not?
Regrettably not.
It was the fucking Barenaked Ladies.
If a traveler
Not
kicks
really.
a pebble, is that pebble pile no longer the one pebble pile it was before?
You're a dickhead.
If
Fuck
you drink a cup of water from the
Fuck
ocean,
you.
is it not the same ocean?
There's gray hair guy, but I don't see glasses guy.
You're a fucking asshole. Okay, so there's room on the international... Fuck you. God, I hate you so much. It's the Barenaked Ladies.
I love you,
This is
Richard.
probably the most contentious recording we've ever done.
Yeah, he told me to be quiet. He's telling you to fuck off.
Don't harass us on Twitter. There's love in the room.
There is.
It sounds like hate, but there's love. We're saying it with smiles, like teeth gritting smiles.
Speak for yourself.
Okay, so there's spaces, there's docking holes.
Docking holes.
That's what she said.
It is. It's 100% what she said.
There's 6 docking holes on the space station.
6.
And there's four different spaceships that dock with the International Space Station.
Dock
and
with the International Space Station.
For fuck's sake.
Wow, that International Space Station gets around.
It does.
4 different ships.
Like orbits like 16
Do
times
they all
a day.
go at the same time?
Sometimes they all go at the same time.
Wow.
Sometimes 6 of them go at the same time.
Whatever floats
Nice.
your International Space Station, I guess.
So there's 4 different cargo spacecraft that deliver science, cargo, and supplies. Orbital
Science, cargo,
ATK's Cygnus
supplies.
ship, which is biggish and has got two round solar arrays on it. It burns up in the atmosphere when it leaves the International Space Station because it's got no heat shield. SpaceX Dragon, which does have a heat shield, so it can return science shit back to the Earth. The Japanese Space Exploration Agency's HTV, as well as the Russian Progress, which is Soyuz capsule without the people in it, and it also has no heat shield. It has no heat shield. And the reason it doesn't have a heat shield is because the heat shield weighs about 1,700 pounds, and so that's 1,700 pounds of cargo it can't take up. So with Progress, they skip the heat shield so they can bring more shit up, but then it burns up in the atmosphere on the way home.
Yeah, and at thousands of dollars an ounce, it's expensive to drag stuff up there.
Yeah. So as of right now, 2,400 research investigations have been conducted from 103 different countries. As I'd said, the station's orbital path takes it over 90% of the Earth's population, and astronauts have taken millions of pictures, which you can all see online. They're pretty cool.
Yeah.
More than 20 different research payloads can be hosted outside the station at once, including something called the High Resolution Earth Imaging Experiment, which is basically a high-def video camera that points at the ground.
That's just to make the flat earthers angry.
Yeah.
Exactly. They use about 1 gallon to 1.5 gallons of water every day, most of which is for flushing the toilet, although 65% of that is recovered and they drink it again.
I'm all right with that logic.
So the space station has an internal pressurized volume, like I said, equal to a 747, although unlike a 747, the space station is pressurized to 1 atmosphere. So the air pressure inside is the same as it is at sea level.
Oh, no ear popping. That's nice.
It's got 15 laptop computers that power it. All of them are Lenovo ThinkPads.
Fantastic.
I don't know why that made me laugh, but it did.
Why are you looking at me?
What do you have to say about the Lenovo ThinkPad?
I mean, I don't have a lot of good things to say about
NASA couldn't shell out for some Alienware. Come on.
So the International Space Station's U.S. segment. So I should mention that the space station is divided into 2 chunks. One is the Russian, the other is the U.S. As I said, the Russian's the old dirty poop stained one, and the U.S.
is the new dirty poop stained one.
Is the new dirty poop stained one because it's really not all that new anymore.
Yep. And maintenance is far behind.
Right. So here's some stats about the size of the space station. This is pretty baffling. So the pressurized module length is 240 feet, 73 meters. The truss length, and these are the 2 spans that stick out on either side of the space station that hold the solar panels, they're 73 meters. The thing weighs, entirely including the solar panels, 419,725 kilograms.
That's about how much I weigh.
Which is like 925,000 pounds.
At least.
It's got a pressurized habitable volume of
You carry it well.
Thanks.
388 cubic meters, not including other spaceships that are attached to it. With the beam module, and the beam stands for the Bigelow Expandable Activity Module, which we talked about in a previous episode on the Skinwalker Ranch.
Yeah.
There was a guy named Bigelow who owned the Skinwalker Ranch. He's the dude who financed the company that built this space station module.
Yeah.
So
Good one.
it's basically like a giant inflatable marshmallow that they stuck on the side of the space station. It quintupled in size when they inflated it. And the reason they sent up this module is because they want to test the difference in radiation shieldability between titanium space station modules and this new lead line fabric that they use in the beam.
Neat.
Sweet.
And so far, their investigations have suggested that the flexible, inflatable stuff shields radiation better than the titanium modules.
Have they found any weird ghosts up in space?
No, there are no ghosts up in space.
Okay. Well, he was into Skinwalker Ranch, so
Yeah. The entire space station runs on 90 kilowatts of power.
same.
Yes.
How much have you had to drink?
He's making these drinks strong.
Like,
Enough.
this is the first episode.
Enough.
Shut up. It'll only get better from here.
Okay, for my explosions episode, the explosions are going to seem bigger. It's going to be
Anyway, so like it said, the current plans for the space station is to have it operate through 2024 with the partners, which are NASA and Roscosmos, discussing a possible extension until 2028. Afterwards, the plans for the space station aren't really clearly laid out, but what Russia wants to do is split the station in half, keep their shitty old shit-stained Russian section, and develop it into an even bigger Russian space station
Neat.
while deorbiting the American half.
Ooh.
I'm going to draw.
See ya.
I'm going to draw a line across the middle of the space
In
station,
shock.
a la I Love Lucy,
Yeah.
and you stay on your side, and I'll stay on mine.
The Berenstain Bears did that too.
So when the space station comes down, we'll be in mid 300s in episodes.
Roughly, yeah.
Yeah.
Anyway, so that's what I've got about space stations.
That's wild.
Yeah. Any comments, questions, queries, concerns, statements, or outbursts?
I always have outbursts, but we'll leave those for later.
What was I supposed to be saving my outbursts?
Yeah, you were.
Oh, damn it.
All right, for Occultae Veritatis podcast, my name is Leon Filger, along with
Sage Murray.
Ood Gallifrey.
And joining us in studio,
J-Lo.
And
Richard Bigley.
Good night.
Love you, bye.
Introduce the Chris Hadfield music once more.
Okay, so this is Somebody Singing by Canadian astronaut Chris Hadfield.
See you in the after show.
Welcome to the cupola. Ready to play a little music?
Indeed. Your scenery looks a little nicer than ours. Have you got everything you need? Do you have your trusty floating guitar pick with you? Excellent. Mine is subject to gravity. Yeah, I know. Yours matches your mission patch. Gleeks, are you guys ready to do this? Yeah! Chris, ready to go?
Yes, Ed, I'm ready.
Okay.
Let's do this.
Let's do it.
On solid fuel wires, turn the key and light the fire. We're leaving Earth today. This rocket's burning bright. We'll soon be out of sight and orbiting in space. Push back in my seat. Look out my window, there goes home. That ball of shiny blue houses everybody anybody ever knew. So sing your song, I'm listening. Out where stars are listening, I can hear your voices bouncing off the moon. If you could see our nation from the International Space Station, you know why I want to get back soon. 18,000 miles an hour, fueled by science and solar power. The oceans racing past. At 5,000 tons, 90 minutes moon to sun. A bullet can't go half this fast. Floating from my seat, look out my window, there goes home. That brilliant ball of blue is where I'm from and also where I'm going to. So sing your song, I'm listening. Out where stars are glistening, I can hear your voices bouncing off the moon. If you could see our nation from the International Space Station, you know why I wanna get back soon. All black and white just fades to gray, where the sun rises 16 times a day. You can't make out borders from up here, just a spinning ball within a tiny atmosphere. Push back in my seat, look out my window, here comes home. What once was fueled by fear now has 15 nations orbiting together here. So sing your song, I'm listening. Out where stars are glistening, I can hear your voices bouncing off the moon. If you could see our nation from the International Space Station, you know why I wanna get back soon. Or you know why I wanna get back soon. You know why I wanna get back soon. Yeah, you know why I wanna get back soon. You know why I wanna get back soon.
Welcome back to the after show. I'm Leon Filger, along with
Dave Murray.
Ood Gallifrey.
Eat shit about who you're pointing to
Sorry,
first.
my
It's
bad.
always me second.
Sorry. So we got an email from Kate, which is a sexy name.
Kate is a sexy name.
Hi guys, I've been listening to your podcast and I absolutely love it.
I love you.
I just got done listening to your 2-part episode on BDSM.
Nice.
I found myself really interested, extremely interested, more interested than I ever thought I would.
Hot.
Interesting.
Awesome. Same. Also.
If you get my drift. I have one problem. I'm a Christian and I feel that the kink scene is a little out of line with the faith. I know you guys are not pro-Christian and I'm completely cool with that, to each their own. The question I have is, do you know any Christians that are into BDSM that I could talk to? I would like to get someone's take on it before I start down this path. Okay, first of all, having read the Bible cover to cover 3 times, there's absolutely nothing about prohibiting whips and chains. So
Yeah,
just get into it.
I've read the Bible twice.
It's totally
Leon's
okay.
read it 3 times. It's cool.
There's nothing at all contrary to BDSM in the Bible.
Nope,
Go for it.
definitely. Yep,
Go
definitely nothing in the Bible that says
Nothing
you're
at
not
all.
supposed to do it.
And also, the Bible is very explicit about enjoying the pleasures of the bedroom, enjoying the nerve endings and the sensations that God gives you. And when you're dealing with BSM, when pain and pleasure are often on the same side of the coin and lines become very blurred. I mean, honestly, if there's a God out there and he gave you the nerve capillaries to enjoy pain, feel free to enjoy them without abandon.
So in response to your question, do you know any Christians? Yeah, all of them. All the Christians I know are into BDSM.
Yeah.
You can
Yeah,
talk-
basically like all of them.
all of them.
I've been to BDSM play parties, and that's something where people come together and they're kinky together in a public event. And there's people of all stripes. There's Sikhs. There's people from the Islamic religion. There's Christians. Like, people all come together. People assume that it's just one like hive of atheist people coming together, but there's people of all stripes and religion.
Because it's not a religious thing. It's like a what you like in terms of your body thing.
Yeah. And like vanilla, I think vanilla sex is kind of a misnomer, because I think like almost every person out there has a little kink in them, something a little twisted, like something besides like
missionary.
Besides,
also,
like,
who likes missionary sex?
Oh, I do.
Oh,
I
no,
do.
no. As a woman, it's boring as fuck.
You gotta throw her knees over your shoulders and just go to town.
Okay, well that's okay, but like I love being on top.
Yeah. I don't know. Each position has its advantages, disadvantages. Like, different parts are exposed to be manipulated and stuff like that. There's a bunch of stuff to do. I don't know. I don't want to knock any position, because each one holds like possibilities and like
missionary
options.
is really good for like slow, in your face, intimate sex.
Yeah, staring deep into the
eyes.
But also, so is like cowgirl when
Yeah.
the girl's on top. I like being on top better because then you kind of get like the clitoral stimulation because you're in charge of it.
Yeah. So I guess
Don't roll up your nose at me.
Bottom line, there's lots of religious people out there that participate in BDSM.
Yes.
If you type in BDSM Christian into Google and ignore all the sex-shamey bullshit articles,
Fuck those people.
There's lots of bloggers out there that are captured by the heart of Jesus that still like to whip each other with chains in the darkness.
Yeah, for sure. So, with the after show, I'm Leon Filger.
It's Murray.
Ooh, Gallifrey.
Good night.
Love you.
There are strange things done in the midnight sun by the men who moil.
Shut up!
Their secret tales that would make
the Arctic trails have their secret tales
that would make your blood run cold. The Northern Lights have seen queer sights, but the queerest they ever did see was that night on the marge of Lake LaBarge. I cremated Sam McGee. Now, Sam McGee was from Tennessee, where the cotton blooms.
I think this is my
Close the door. You're letting the cold in.